A gloved fingertip teases at a pale square of cloth wedged in bramble. The glove is wet with spring. The wind smells like leaf mold and something older. The cloth yields with a quiet, reluctant sound, and at the edge of it, threads, tiny and deliberate, like a breath someone left there and walked away. Do you feel that? The skin of the world holding a secret.
Find somewhere dark and quiet. Put your headphones on and listen closely now. I'm Samnang, and this is Nature's Dread. Tonight's story is called Hedgerow Samplers.
She was a volunteer on a spring patrol, someone who knows hedges the way others know kitchens. She kept to the paths, to the rhythm of pruning shears and the soft map of bird calls. The hedge itself had bones, hawthorn and blackthorn woven through decades, a living fence that kept fields and secrets apart. On her walks, she learned to notice the small things, the ravel of twine, the way leaves tucked into one another, the color of moss that likes shade. That attention is what made the sampler visible at all.
The first discovery seemed almost accidental. A pale square snagged like a moth's wing. She didn't pull it free. She took a single photograph, hands steady, backing away so the bramble stayed whole. At first, she told herself it was craft fallout or a memorial ribbon gone soft. But when another square appeared 2 weeks later, and another, the pattern stopped fitting ordinary explanations. Here's where it gets interesting.
Each fragment was different but consistent. The same faded red, the same tiny cross-stitch counts, initials worked into corners, occasional motifs, a tiny anchor, a repeated dot, a short bar of silk. When she began cataloging them, mapping where each sampler caught in the hedge, a line traced itself across an old footpath and, with a chill, overlapped the perimeter of a cold case search years prior. It could be coincidence, it could be a map, or it could be a memory stitched so softly the world nearly swallowed it. I talked to a textile conservator, impartial, careful, who reminded me that fabric tells too many truths and too many lies at once. Threads can be dyed the same way in dozens of towns. Salt and sun age different fibers in ways that mimic each other. You can estimate, you can't always identify. She explained why the volunteer's choice to photograph from a distance was the right one. Handling contaminates, removing context, even altering dye flakes that may never be seen the same way again. That restraint, photograph, record, leave, became the ethical spine of this story. A folklorist told me about samplers as social language. In some places, people stitched grief into cloth and left it where the living met the wild. Hedges, trees, threshing barns. Initials could be memorial, a way of marking absence. In other traditions, stitched markers guided families back to places they had left. In still others, motifs encode stories for only a few to read. Folklore insists on ambiguity. The same gesture might be both map and memorial, both signal and ritual. The night remembers, she said, and I could hear why.
There is also the practical side. A search and rescue coordinator I spoke with, stern, patient, reminded me how evidence works in the field. If a fragment might link to a person, moving it can destroy a chain that an investigation needs. He praised the volunteers' documentation and stressed that local authorities or designated conservators should be notified before anything else happens. This is where duty presses against curiosity. What do you do when the living fence keeps someone's story? Weeks passed, and the line of samplers became a language of repetition. Same stitch counts, 3 crosses, a diagonal bar, 2 knots, over and over, each separated by lengths of hedge that matched an old footfall pattern. This wasn't random litter. It had an author, or at least an intention. The volunteer felt a pull, to read, to honor, to protect. But she also felt the danger, exposure that could erase meaning, publicity that could invite trespass, and people who might misinterpret a memorial as a map for wrongdoing. Then came the message.
A photograph with initials in red thread she thought she recognized from a family bulletin board a town over. She called them. They called back with a voice that tightened and loosened all at once. Curiosity, fear, the ache of someone waiting. The family couldn't confirm, but their interest turned a private pattern into public question. The volunteer had to decide, stay quiet and protect the hedge, or escalate and possibly break the thread of whatever ritual this was. There is no neat moral answer, only choices with consequences.
On a pre-dawn rewalk she took with a conservator and a SAR volunteer, the world was a series of small, amplified sounds. Headlamp beams cut through mist. Gloves brushed bramble, soft rasp. The samplers sat like breaths along the living fence, private in the dim. They recorded again and again from a respectful distance, wider-angle photographs, notes on stitch counts, and a slow, methodical march that honored both the textiles and the hedge. There was a procedural choreography to it. Document, avoid contact, involve authorities if needed. Yet the moment itself felt like trespassing into someone else's quiet grief.
The conservator warned about contamination, pollen, dirt, hands that warm a thread and change the way fibers settle. She refused to promise a forensic revelation. Thread types can narrow possibilities, but rarely point to a single person. Dye analysis can suggest era or region, but not intent. All of that is technical language for this. Fabric rarely tells the whole truth on its own. It offers suggestions, possibilities, and sometimes beautiful, maddening ambiguity. Community debate followed. Some wanted the samplers publicized to find kin or answers. Others feared that publicity would invite curiosity. People cutting hedges to find stitches. Children left with brittle scraps. Conservationists counseled patience. The SAR team favored disclosure only if it could aid an active search. The volunteer found herself at the center of this orbit, a single person guarding a living archive, deciding how loudly the world should listen. And then, the turning point. A family member contacted a local police liaison, asking what had been done. The liaison asked for photographs, dates, locations in broad terms. Not coordinates, broad. The volunteer had to choose what to share. She opted for what the conservator recommended. Annotated photos showing scale and stitch counts, a descriptive map that avoided exact coordinates, and a clear chain of who had seen the items. It wasn't dramatic. It was careful. And often, careful is where respect begins. The climax of this quiet story isn't sirens or a violent reveal. It's a pre-dawn line of light and breath, walking the hedge, documenting each sampler in place, and deciding together not to touch. In that hour, the volunteer realized the samplers might be memorial, map, or both, and she accepted that some mysteries remain braided rather than solved. Still, there was something urgent in the work, to keep context alive so any future investigator or any family would have a chance at the truth without having the landscape shredded by well-meaning hands. Afterward, agencies responded in small ways. A conservator wrote a note about contamination risk and preservation strategy. SAR logged the finding and kept it on file. The community talked about ritual and stewardship. The volunteer continued her patrols, eyes more sharpened, hands more patient. The hedge remained itself, indifferent, containing more stitches than anyone could read. The story left scars, on memory more than on skin, but also a model. Photograph from a safe distance, report to the right people, keep the living fence whole. And the final stitch, the image I keep returning to, is a small motif, a tiny anchor worked in red, the thread barely raised from the cloth, as if someone traced longitude in a palm. It resists a single meaning, a memorial that maps, a guide that mourns, a happenstance of similar threads torn free by the wind. When you look at it long enough, meanings multiply, and the hedge keeps them all. If you're still here, thank you for listening through to the end.
A brief and important note before we go. If you ever find a textile fragment in the wild, please do not touch or remove it. Photograph from a safe distance, record the date and general location without pinpoint coordinates, and contact local park managers, police, or a vetted textile conservator. Links and resources are in the episode notes. Leave the hedge intact. Let it keep its stitches until professionals can make sense of them without harm.
If this story stayed with you, share it with someone who listens in the dark. And subscribe so you never miss an episode. There's more like this. Quiet things the landscape keeps to itself, and people who notice. Until next time, check the corners.